Sup, y'all? I am your host, Tayler Onion. This is Hang Time, where we focus on amplifying the stories of women in sports. I am so excited today. We are back this week with Laura Gentile, the co-founder, one of the co-founders of Storied Sports and the founder of espnW, which is very, very exciting. Laura, welcome. Let's get some hang time.
Nice to meet you, Taylor. It's great to be here. Thanks for having me.
Absolutely. I'm fired up. We had connected on LinkedIn relatively recently, and so I'm excited to get to have kind of a deeper conversation with you today. I feel like the place to start is espnW. I don't know if that's fair, but you've had a 20-year career with ESPN, probably one that, people are asking you all the time, how did you do it? How did you launch espnW at a time when women's sports are certainly not what they're doing today? And you could even argue that in 2009, 2010, there was kind of a lull, even from what we saw when the WNBA had started. At that time would have been almost 15 years into the WNBA. So tell me about your career at ESPN and what led to the founding of espnW.
Sure. I mean, it was early days. It's funny because there's plenty of women who've been at it for a very long time, whether it's Billie Jean King or Ann Myers-Drysdale, Cheryl Miller. I mean, you name it. There's women who've been plowing ahead for a very long time. Olympians, obviously. But yeah, back in I guess it's 2008 when we really started the conversation seriously about creating espnW and a division that's focused on women and women's sports. And then 2010 is when we launched, and yeah, we were like the only game in town for a very long time. We launched with our espnW retreat, which was interesting because we called it the espnW retreat because we felt like there was no gathering place for women in sports. Whether it was executives on the league level or on the media front or athletes, there was really no place that convened us all and got us talking and connecting. So we called it the espnW retreat, and it was a super success. Like, we sold out and we had so much interest. But I was also asked to rename it after the first year because to be a little bit more serious. And that's when it became the espnW Summit. But I mean, to really launch that and get the green light to do an event of that ilk, the first of its kind, it was a lot of different conversations internally. I mean, it was very much an evangelism role at the time to talk about women's sports was going to be the segment of sports that had the most growth opportunity because it was essentially at zero, if you will, or
Right.
3%, as they would say. So talking about the growth opportunity in terms of covering these athletes and telling these stories, and then the growing power of women in sports, women as greater and greater decision makers, either on the brand side or on the media side or in front offices and on the league front, and that this was an audience to be served. The women's sports was so underserved at the time. So again, it was a lot of like pounding the table, walking around with a deck, cajoling people, trying to convince them that this is a big opportunity. And I think as a college athlete, I was a college athlete, I knew women are playing sports at such a high level across sports and across the country and just really weren't being covered. And so on some level, it was a huge amount of white space that I just had to have, people come along with me and see it for themselves. But back in 2010, yeah, it was early days and a lot of people didn't really understand what we were up to and why we were doing it.
Yeah, I think about that so often. I mean, even back to my own college playing days, we were selling out our arena every single weekend. We were jam-packed in there, 4,000, 5,000, 6,000 fans. And then to also have this kind of lack of media coverage, like it was a big deal for us if we were going to have, ESPN or ESPNU or even Big Ten Network match that was going to be on. But that was still so small in terms of people being able to view if we were on the road or whatever. So you mentioned that you had the conversations or first kind of started these conversations in 2008. It took you a couple years before it actually happened. Mm-hmm. What would you say was kind of a tipping point that got people on board with, okay, we should actually do this and have kind of a women's specific space?
I think it was unassailable that women's interest in sports and women's participation in sports was a real factor. The to your point, since Title IX, right, the participation in sports has skyrocketed on the women's side. And obviously the collegiate level has offered us all so many opportunities. I played field hockey at Duke. Like, it changed my life. It's changed, I think, a lot of our lives in that whether it's the confidence or the team building skills or the ability to lead. So I was very persuasive in the fact that the time has come, in terms of women in sports. Like, we're not an afterthought. We love sports. We care about sports. We participate at such a high level. You see it at the world-class level when it's the World Cup or the Olympics. And you can see basketball really starting to, make headway, right? That you had said the WNBA was at 15 years, but the college game was amazing, right? That was coming off of all of UConn's dynasty, and Diana Taurasi and Sue Bird were, household names. So I think, it was just an inflection point where I think everybody internally was like, yeah, this is a good time to do it, because we're starting to see the swell. And it just kept going for the next 10 years. And here we are 15 years later, where everyone acknowledges it's the biggest growth opportunity in sports, and everyone's looking to invest, and there's real interest on the brand front and on the media side.
It's a little bit crazy to me to hear, right, 15 years later. You were pitching this in 2008, 2009, 2010, like, this is the biggest, kind of growth opportunity. There's so much white space that's in the space. And now 15 years later, we're having the exact same conversations. Not maybe unlike, I saw somebody post recently about the 99ers, the U.S. women's national team in 1999, and how kind of big they were, selling out stadiums, and it was, women's sports have arrived. And then still 10, 11 years later is not until ESPNW happens. It's these kind of big chunks of time in between when people are saying they've arrived. Oh, just kidding. Oh, now they've arrived. Oh, just kidding. Oh, now women's sports have arrived. Was there a moment with ESPNW where you were like, this is really impactful, and I know that this is going to kind of sustain beyond just a couple of years or maybe a short amount of time?
Sure. I mentioned it already, but I think that first conference, that first ESPNW retreat in September of 2010, there was just so much energy. There was so much passion. We had incredible athletes, Lisa Leslie, Shannon Miller. I mean, we just had Hannah Storm was there with us from an ESPN perspective. There was just so much interest, Billie Jean King and Julie Foudy. And you could feel it. It was like palpable. Like, everybody wanted to talk and get together and compare notes and start building this network of women who would support each other. So it's funny, that was a telltale sign to me, just the energy and the passion. And when it ended, I had multiple executives come up to me, male executives, basically saying, hey, Laura, this was an incredible success. You're going to do this every year, right? And I was like, sure. Because at the time, it really was just our launch. But we realized we were onto something. There was just all this pent-up energy where, again, all these female executives and brand leaders just had never really met or never really convened under the guise of women in women's sports. Like, maybe they bumped into each other at a Super Bowl or at CES or something like that, industry gathering, but nothing that was under the banner of let's build out women's sports together and let's celebrate each other. But it's also funny, Tayler, because we got a ton of criticism out of, like, nowhere after we did that summit. Like, the USA Today wrote a piece about us, and they mentioned that we were offering pedicures. So all the news was about, oh gosh, this really was a boondoggle for women, and look, they're offering pedicures. And then there was a blogger, and I forget her name, who called it the pink ghetto, that we were creating the pink ghetto with the ESPNW. So even though that was the moment I felt like, gosh, people are paying attention and I have the support we need, we also got all this undue criticism for creating something new, where everyone was just sort of really pessimistic as to, like, what our motives were and would this be a success. And I think that's been the vibe all along. It's like you make 2 steps forward and you take 1 back and you take a hit and you just keep going. So I think it's everybody kind of fighting the good fight and pushing forward. And we tried to set the tone with ESPNW and the whole industry of like, let's work together because it's going to be a long time before we're competing with the NFL or these established male brands. Let's build out a whole ecosystem working together and making more opportunity for all of us.
I think for anything that's a big idea, there's almost always criticism up front, right? Like the same thing goes for Title IX when that legislation was passed. There were huge names. If you look back, Bear Bryant, who at the time I think still would have been at Alabama, was a staunch opponent of Title IX and its passage, and so many athletic directors across the countries of prominent institutions saying this is going to ruin our men's sports program and why would we ever want to pass this? And then the only thing that it has done is provide more opportunities for more people, specifically women, to be involved with sports. So I think if history has told us anything over the course of time, it's that when you have a really big idea that has potential to be super impactful, a lot of people up front are going to, be pushing really, they're going to be very resistant, I guess, to that idea.
Yeah. But it is amazing to see. I mean, like I said, for a bit there, good 5-6 years, it felt like we were the only game in town. But it's wonderful to see now, not only on the professional leagues, which is just booming, and we'll see what shakes out because there's multiple leagues from multiple sports right now. But on the kind of coverage and media front, whether it's Together or The Gist or just women's sports, it's just exciting to see more and more people diving in and filling this white space of opportunity. And that's really what we're trying to do. Yeah, that's really what we're trying to do with Storied Sports, which I'm sure you'll ask me about. But it's just exciting that this is a time of real growth for sure.
Yeah, I do want to switch to Storied Sports. I want to ask you one question before we do that, which is, of the last 15 years, so we were talking a little bit offline about specifically volleyball leagues. We're now seeing, Unrivaled in terms of basketball and Project B. They're talking about starting this new league. There's an Upshot League that's going to be starting in May as well. I'm curious to know, over the last 15 years, that's a glimpse of how much things have changed. But is there anything that stands out, I guess, in your mind over the course of the last 15 years since ESPNW launched in terms of media coverage or possibilities? Like, the media coverage to me has opened up the opportunity for these leagues to begin. But from your standpoint, I'm curious to know, is that kind of the best thing that's come out of this, or what stands out in your mind?
Well, I don't know if there's a best. I think it's the fact that everyone's eyes are open, male and female. So there's more and more brands, again, female brands, male brands, automotives. Like, there's just so many categories and so many brands that are investing and are interested and understand that this reach is really valuable to consumers and that there's true engagement. And then from a media perspective, whether it's Ion Scripts or NBC or Amazon, like jumping in and wanting to have live rights. I mean, that's a huge difference maker. And then there's just more and more female executives and senior leaders who are championing this effort. I know for us in the early days of W, getting to female senior executives who could say yes was critical. We got to Julie Edelman at Procter & Gamble, and we spoke to senior leaders at Nike, and we got to, at the time, Sarah Rabo-Hagan at Gatorade. They could say yes. And so there are more and more women in decision-making roles and roles of power that can say yes to these opportunities. Andrea Brimmer at Ally. So that's a huge step forward as well. So I'm not sure there's one thing. I think it's this convergence of interest, and that's what you need to build an ecosystem and to really build out this industry. You need all these legs of the stool, if you will, to be working together. Not just one brand saying women's sports matters, and kind of like screaming into the wind. It's now so many, the podcast world, right? There's so many more podcasters and talent who want to talk about this and talk to athletes and feature athletes. So it's a whole host of things, I think, that are exciting. And then you have the Winter Olympics coming up, because traditionally the Olympics are the single best showcase for women athletes, whether it's winter or summer. So I think we'll have another big inflection point this February to say, look, women are kicking ass and they're amazing, and check it out yourself.
Yeah. This is a good segue to jump into Storied now. So you mentioned podcast, the kind of featured series that's out through Storied right now, the 85ers, the origin story there. I want to get into that, but before we do, I would love to hear how Storied started. Like what was kind of the thing that kicked that off and made that like, okay, this is going to be the next project.
Yeah, well, I think since I left ESPN, I had like a lot of big ideas as to things I wanted to pursue. And it was always sort of in the back of my mind that like I would love to do another iteration of espnW with real independence and a real focus on the creativity and the ambition and the opportunity that I knew was out there. So that was sort of always in the back of my head. And then it was basically finding sort of the right people to do it with, and the right sort of like quality standards and commitment to storytelling and sensibility, if you will. And so my partner, Jamie Messler, who started the Players Tribune and was a longtime employee at Excel Management, just really has a great eye for talent and for telling the athlete story. And so when we started talking, it really just felt right, like a right combination of experiences, the right sort of ambition, the right sense of like, I want to do something big, and we both have an entrepreneurial spirit. So I think for both of us, it was sort of the right time in our career and also the right time in the marketplace to pursue this, particularly with a focus on the athlete story and really making that our North Star. So it's just, yeah, the right time at the right place with the right partner, and it's not always easy to find.
Yeah, absolutely. The vision that's on Storied's website is legacy to livelihood. You mentioned telling the athlete story. I think that's something we don't see a ton of. We're seeing more of it in the women's space, but we haven't seen that historically. We see, the game, the match, whatever, and then that's the media time. That's it. We're starting to see more storytelling in women's sports and kind of more personalities. And of course, there's a space for that. But can you talk a little bit about legacy into livelihood and what that means?
Well, I think for a long time we've seen women participating, right? There's been some professional leagues here and there, but I think we're still scratching our head with, is the compensation right? Right? I mean, you're seeing it right now with the WNBA. What's the right level of compensation for these world-class athletes? And not having full transparency as to the P&L and the revenue and what's net revenue, what's gross revenue. And so we're looking to build a model where the athletes are at the center, and everything we do and everything we create, there's revenue flowing to the athletes that are featured. So if you look at the 85ers, which is our first project, and it was pretty ambitious, 7-part audio documentary, and it's on Spotify, Apple, and Amazon. That's an example of a team that most people didn't even know existed, sadly. We kid around, but it's like a sad truth that most people think women's soccer started with the 99ers, and they were incredible. They were pioneers in their own right? They set the tone, in a large way for just the success of the women's national team. But the 85ers were 14 years earlier. Isn't that nuts? Like, it was the first women's national team that these young women, these young girls were sort of thrown together, at an Olympic festival, and then they picked the national team from the Olympic festival. And they didn't even know. Like, they didn't even know that this was, like, what was the output of this Olympic festival. And so it's a fascinating story to hear about it from Michelle Akers' perspective, from all of the 17 85ers' perspective of how this came to be. And that's an example of telling a story that most people didn't know. It was formative in the women's sports space. And Michelle Akers is our executive producer on it. And these women, over time, as we continue to grow the storytelling and the marketplace around the 85ers, we'll see revenue from it. And that's really important to us because they're such unsung heroes competing, 40 odd years ago, and never actually not only getting their flowers, but they never got any compensation, essentially. There was no professional leagues, there was no way.
Right.
So that's an example of creating legacy and shining a spotlight on that legacy and creating livelihood for them. But just doing that on an ongoing basis with current athletes, where everything we create, it's not just like, hey, do us a favor or can you show up, but actually there's revenue flowing their way, which I think could potentially be a new opportunity, a new model in this whole space.
Yeah, I love the series. I've watched a couple of episodes and just the background and context and things like that it provides. I had mentioned to you in the notes that Bernadette Noonan was cracking me up. She said there was some line in there where she said she's outlived the Lord, and that was hilarious to me. But it's provides so much context and so much stuff that we didn't know before. Again, to your point, the 99ers I think are popular. The Brandy Chastain knee slide, of course, iconic. But there's also so many athletes that are part of this 85ers team that laid the foundation for the 99ers to even exist. And the model that you've just described for them to generate revenue off of this story that's being told about them makes it even cooler. I didn't know that was a piece of it. So I think that's, of course, innovative in itself. Is there a reason why the 85ers you felt was the kind of right story to kick off what you're doing with Storied Sports?
Well, part of it is soccer, right, is so front and center when it comes to women's sports. It is the single most successful women's national team. You know, when you think about the U.S. women's national team soccer, like they're just incredible performances on the Olympic level, on the World Cup level. They're sort of the most dynastic, national team we have here in the United States. I mean, women's basketball, of course, they're unsung heroes too. But our relationship with Michelle Akers, was an important factor. That she literally was named FIFA Player of the Century with Pele. So she was the women's corollary to Pele. And most nobody knows that. And so that was very compelling to us to put her front and center and enable her to shine. But I mentioned the U.S. women's, basketball team. Like we intend to tell the story of some of those original Olympic teams and the Ann Myers-Drysdale era, So there are so many untold stories. I think for us, it's combining the legacy and the history with current athletes. And making sure current athletes are now participating in a way that's different and ideally improved over the past. So both shining a spotlight on the past and the present stars, if you will.
So you mentioned this kind of revenue setup where the 85ers will benefit off of the viewership essentially over time. Are you able to share any info on that structure and setup? Like, how does that even work?
Well, every situation will be unique. When it comes to the 85ers, we did set up an LLC in their name. So it's basically an LLC that's tied to all 17 of these athletes, this team. And so again, as we build out the marketplace and as we build out more engagement around the series and we start driving even more revenue, they will see a portion of that. Yeah. And again, it becomes a model for the future.
What do you hope that viewers of that series or listeners of that series take away from listening or from watching?
I mean, on some level it's basic in that you want to really show that this is a fascinating story. So hopefully they're fascinated and they're entertained and they learn something. I mean, again, the fact that women have been competing and striving and working for so long to get us to this place in 2026 where ideally, there are more and more household names, and you want to watch the NWSL, and you want to see these women competing. And I just think a sense of perspective, like it's always been a fight, and so just kind of keep it up and don't lose your energy behind it.
Yeah, I love that. Don't lose your energy behind it. Is there anything else that you're working on? Can you share at all other projects that maybe are upcoming through Storied Sports? Are you able to share anything there?
Well, I teased a little bit about some historical basketball work that we're definitely looking at. I'll give you a taste of just one other area. So one of our founding athletes is Michelle Akers. Another is Cheryl Miller.
Mm.
So, I mean, it doesn't get much better than that. I mean, they're both on the Mount Rushmore of women's sports. But Cheryl Miller in high school, you may know the story, maybe you don't, scored 105 points in a game. And it's actually like the 44th anniversary on Monday.
Oh, wow.
And again, we don't feel like that story's ever really been told. So that's an example. I mean, she's just iconic. She set the stage for everything we're talking about now when it comes to women's basketball. She's an icon for athletes like Candace Parker and Juju Watkins. And so shining a spotlight on her and getting people to have a sense of her history and the fact that she scored 105 points in a high school game, literally in 3 quarters. There was no 3-point line. There was no shot clock. I think she went 47 for 50 from the field. Like, she's incredible, like beyond incredible, and that story has never been told. So again, Taylor, we're going to balance, history with current athletes, but that's just like scratching the surface of 2 incredible stories that really haven't been fully told and done justice.
Yeah, Cheryl Miller's story, I don't even think I was really aware of her. I might have loosely heard her name over the years, but I didn't really know her until the Women of Troy documentary that came out. And I'm watching it like, I loved basketball. Like, basketball was my sport as a kid. I played volleyball, went on to play volleyball in college, but basketball was my sport. How do I not know about Cheryl Miller and her story? So I love what's happening. I love this concept behind let's bring, some of these stories that should absolutely be known. I mean, that's the 105 points is equivalent to me of like the flu game, Michael Jordan. Everybody knows, what that is. And so creating
but it's not true because she only played 3 quarters. Like,
yes,
I don't even know. It's like she must have been exhausted.
Just constantly, right. Yeah. So I love that this is a platform that's focused, on kind of sharing some of these untold stories of women in sports. As we move into kind of the wrap up here, I'm curious to know if you have any advice for women who want to create platforms to help highlight some of these stories, both of stories of the past, stories of women who are doing great things now, but folks who are also looking not just to kind of take up space in that area. What advice would you have?
I would say do it. I mean, look at you, right? Like, you have a passion and you created this podcast. I had a passion and I helped create like a media brand, and it's not easy, as you know. I mean, it might look easy. You have a beautiful studio and you have a producer and you're doing really well, but it's never going to be easy. But I think if you really love it and have a passion for it and want to make a difference, you can do it. So just put your head down and do it. But I think from a advice perspective, be smart about it. Have your facts, have your data, have your argument as to why it's necessary, and ideally find some great partners. In the early days of W, we had great brand partners and great support, and we all need that, especially in the early days, because it's going to be more sort of bumps and bruises than it is going to be like, easy going.
Yeah. I am seeing a ton of younger creators who are really focused on the sports space, and a lot of folks are interested in being in that space. Of course, I think social media tells a story of oh gosh, that looks like a dream job, and you just get to show up and go to the games and some of these different things. And so anyway, that was why I wanted to ask the question, because I know there's a lot of folks coming up who are interested in that space as well. If you could, this final question here, if you could get some hang time with any woman in sports, who would it be and why?
Well, it's interesting. I will just talk about, again, historical perspective. FloJo?
Yeah.
Florence Griffith, FloJo to me, Florence Griffith Joyner, she broke the mold back in the day. I mean, she had so much style. She had such a fashion sense. Gold medalist, Olympian. I wish I had met her. She's no longer with us, right? But she was a woman who kind of transcended women's sports and all of sports, and everyone was talking about her. A current athlete, I really love to follow Paige Beckers.
Yeah.
Again, since she's been a phenom since she's, 10 or 12, just what that journey was like and how to she's handled it so well. Injuries, obviously at UConn. So yeah, that's sort of, again, past and present right there.
Yeah, those are two great ones. That actually, you were the second person to mention FloJo, and again, talk about a story
Really?
that's not told. It was now not in podcast context, but somebody I had done just a quick media, who would it be if you could spend time? And somebody was
Yeah.
like, FloJo, the nails, the style, like, yes, it's
Right.
her all the way. Yep.
Totally.
She's a great one. Well, Laura, thank you so much for taking the time out of your day to come and get some hang time.
Absolutely. Thank you for doing this, and great to meet you, and appreciate it all.
Absolutely. Absolutely. All right, listeners, you can follow along. We'll be back in a couple of weeks. Until then, you can follow along at HangtimeP0D on all socials. You can check us out, hangtimep0d.com. We'll see you next time.